Morning, Fishkeepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. Happy Friday, happy days, we're good to go. Unfortunately, John will not be with us today. He went to the dentist this morning, and from all accounts, he had half of his face ripped out and he's feeling a little bit sore today. So, apologies to John, but we do have a guest waiting for us, so we'll bring him up. Good morning, Cory.
Good morning. It's about 11 a.m. here. I think it's 8 a.m. there.
Correct. Yep. 8 a.m. on the dot. Cool.
I was telling the chat it took us a few times to line this up because you would message me, but I'd be in a different time zone. And I know with daylight savings and other stuff before trying to set meetings, like if I'm in Germany, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I was 2 days off and I thought it was AM versus PM. So it's been a while in the making for this.
Yeah. The daylight savings stuffs a lot of stuff up. I've had to send a few apology messages to people going, oops, forgot about daylight savings. So, it's just one of those things that happens twice a year.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's much appreciated. Can you just give us a little bit of an introduction on who you are and how you became interested in fish keeping?
Yeah, so very passionate gamer and played a lot of Magic the Gathering and World of Warcraft, and I made some friends through that process, as you would. And it was a Friday night after we'd kind of drafted Magic the Gathering, and we were bored, and it turned out that we went back to my buddy's house, and he had a 72-gallon Bowfront planted aquarium, which is a bunch of tetras, and he was kind of a lifelong fish keeper, had been passed down through his family, and I kind of fell in love with it. But at the time, didn't ask any questions. I'm just like, this thing's awesome. But as I kept kind of hanging out with the gentleman, eventually I started asking, like, how much work does this take? And his answer was essentially none, because he'd change water maybe once a month, and he just happened to have a balance of the tetras did really well with all the live plants that he had going. And after a couple months of that, I eventually bought my own aquarium. He took me to a local pet store, still in business today, Bridges Pets. And I remember spending about $900 because we were both, I was brand new, and two, he had only, I don't want to say scratched the surface, but that's what you did. You just walked in, you're like, yep, I'm going to need and he had the insight to give me, hey, buy a canister filter. Hey, buy the light that has 2 T8 bulbs. Buy a Python gravel vac. And so it ended up being a lot. And my first aquarium, I didn't want something small, so I went with a 65-gallon aquarium. And my wife, or I guess it was girlfriend at the time, I had said, like, I'm thinking about getting an aquarium. And she came home from work, and I was installing a 65-gallon aquarium in the bedroom. And that was, I still think that was the closest that we've ever had, like, a real fight, because one, I've got, my friend in our own bedroom, and we're putting it, she had no input on where it was going, and by that time it was already like half filled with water, and no way could she have known this was the start of the rest of my career and my life. But that's the origin story. And the first fish I ever got were we went to a different pet store, which no longer exists. I actually bought most of it when they went out of business, but was 6 penguin tetras, and they actually only had 4. So I got 4 penguin tetras, and that was fun for about 5 days. And then as a new hobbyist, I was hooked. So I went in the next weekend, and I got some black mollies, and that actually was the entire start of my hobby, because they had babies, and that blew my mind, because I, at the time, saw dollar signs. I was like, wait, I just paid $4, and I just made these? Coming from the gamer background where you would be trading cards and doing all of that, I was like, this is crazy. So then I actually started looking into breeding fish, and that was my passion for actually many years. And so much so, I actually got into kind of monster fish, and which would be like, big Pangasius and stingrays and big Mabu puffers, and that was my first kind of thing I was into. And then also breeding African cichlids, because they were easy to breed, being mouth brooders. And so I kind of befriended a store. I ended up volunteering there, then ended up working there and running it for 5 years. And that's where a bunch of customers were asking, why not open your own store? Because they saw kind of the limitations. I was way out in the middle of nowhere, and And I was more kind of getting into guppies, even though I was breeding African cichlids in my garage full time to support the income because it wasn't very much pay at the fish store. And after about a couple years of people telling that, and then having a buddy who said, "Hey, I'll put some money in, we could start this thing," I said, "Well, if a year from today this still sounds like a good idea, we will then actually approach that because this sounds crazy." I was only 28 at the time, and I made it very clear, like, if you're gonna put some money in, if I fail, I don't want to go into my 30s like, oh, I'm $50,000 or $100,000 in debt or anything like that. And he said, "I'm willing to gamble that," and I go, "I sure." You're more optimistic than I am because I'm just a 28-year-old guy that doesn't know anything in my mind at the time. And but I was clear that I wanted to run a good pet store or a good fish store, honestly. And my keys were I was going to embrace social media because no one was really utilizing Facebook, and YouTube was a thing, but not really at the time. It was very infant stages at that point. And so we kind of, and my other principle was pay a living wage because at the time we're at the fish store, something had to change because I had to use my girlfriend, my wife now, to like get a cell phone. I couldn't qualify for anything because my income was so low, and I just worked at a pet store and everything. And so the goal was health insurance, people would be able to raise a family, buy a house, those types of things. And so we kind of launched that, did that very hard for the first couple of years, eating lots of top ramen behind my display tank and not taking days off. I tried to work actually a half day the day we got married. My wife would not let that happen, but I worked either side of it. We didn't go on a honeymoon or anything like that because there was only me for so long. It's like if I wasn't there, the store wasn't open, and we didn't have the popularity and all of that to just not be open. And so eventually, after like we get to like year 3, and I'm making take home, I think I took home about $40,000, which was fine. It was just fine. But the problem was it's not fine for like 80 to 100 hours of work a week. I could go work for anybody else and make that kind of money and not have the stress of if people don't come in, I don't eat that day. Or, we almost went out of business once where the big 360-gallon tank busted a seam and flooded the businesses near me and everything. And so I wouldn't have had that stress. And so I remember sitting on our couch at home late because it was an hour drive for each of us in our careers to get back home, and it's like 10 p.m. at night, and I'm like, well, here's the deal. I'm going all in on YouTube. I think that's going to be a thing that can help us, and maybe some online stuff, and either A, in a year it will have worked, or B, we'll be finding an exit strategy out of this because I can't keep up this pace forever. Oddly enough, that pace is light compared to what I do now. But at the time, it felt like, you just can't work any harder because I was having to learn everything. And that was always stressful, like learning just taxes and accounting. And I remember the second year we got audited by like payroll stuff. And it was because we had hired an electrician and they never submitted their paperwork. But just like the fear of being audited by the government. And it ended up being fine. We didn't owe any money. Like, it was actually fine. We had done everything right on our end. But the stress of that was, and it lasted months because it's a very long process. And every decision, like, do I invest in this product and bring it into the store, or am I saving money because they're about to steal it all from me? And, we kind of know a lot of the story now. And that is like, hey, YouTube kind of worked out and selling online worked out. And there's lots of speed bumps and pitfalls along the way to that story as well. But, I a lot of times I'll say I've been very lucky, and I do think there's luck involved. And then there's some quotes I've been hearing lately that I resonate a lot with, like, the more you work, the luckier you get. And I feel like that's because it's not just complete luck. There's definitely, we just gone on a cruise, for instance, with my mother-in-law, and we got back at 1 a.m. and then I was physically unloading a cargo container in my driveway and my forklift was broken. So there's a grind mentality that, like, yeah, the luckier you get because you're working harder to provide those opportunities, but it still takes luck. There is still luck involved for dang sure. And I feel fortunate to be where I am and to be able to employ 30 plus people and keep kind of acquiring good talent and be lucky to, as a hobbyist, 'cause I'm still a hardcore hobbyist, that likes to breed fish, but to be able to take and go, hey, I wish this product existed, and a year or two in time I can make a product exist, or I wish this thing did this thing, And that's been really fun and kept me connected to both the job and the hobby of like, hey, my overall goal now is to actually improve the hobby in some way. And I think we're making some headway in some ways, but also it's not like redoing the whole hobby. And that's like a lifelong career thing, not like, hey, we accomplished it in 6 months. So, yeah.
I think for anyone who has started their own small business, a lot of those words will resonate with you. The amount of grind that has to be done, and like what people do see as a success, but the 2 o'clock in the morning still working up again at 5:30, 6 o'clock, just the non-stop, the learning curve, the am I doing this right, the self-doubt, all of that resonates with anyone who has done small business. And I'm sure there's people in the chat that are involved in small business and feel that way and experience that 100% as well.
Yeah.
Cool. You touched on how you started Aquarium Co-op. Did you expect it to grow to the point where it is now? Has that always kind of been the end goal, or has it just kind of continued to snowball and you've just ridden the ride?
Yeah, so definitely wasn't the plan. The plan was just like, in my mind, I thought, hey, maybe I'd have a couple of employees and we'd just be a local pet store that did really well, as in not financially. Like, yes, we wanted to like financially need to be viable, but it wasn't like, yeah, if I do this right, I'll be making the money like a doctor. It's like I didn't go into anything of that. I'm going, okay, what's a good pet store look like? And I was just trying to do that. And at the time, I hadn't traveled the country to see what good pet stores look like, because there are some that just blow your mind in terms of the way the company runs and the selection and just the things they've done. And I love to tour fish stores because there's always another thing like, that's brilliant. Whoever thought of that, that's brilliant. I hate the way you're doing that, but that I will implement. That is amazing. And so I thought, if I could get to a point where we could afford a home and I had health insurance, and that was basically winning, and I got to play with fish all day, that would be what winning looked like. And we were able to do that, but not without incredible amounts of time. And with a local business, like a fish store type business, a lot of it is marinating time. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, I've driven by that fish store 100 times, but then your kid that was 2 is now 6, and you're thinking about getting an aquarium. And so you needed to be there for 4 years to finally rope that person in. And so it very slowly can build if you're doing the right things. It's just whether you can prevent burnout. And I definitely was hitting burnout. We started getting some bad reviews and things like that where I wouldn't go out of my way. And in fact, when I reflect on it, it's like, I am only here to make people happy. Like, why was I short with people? And it is that, well, I only got 4 hours of sleep, and there's this stress over here, and the customer before you was a real Karen, and you're getting proximity, aggro basically on accident. And so that's actually when I really stepped back and was like, I have to hire people. We have to scale this thing because this is not sustainable forever. It just, on average, I was seeing my wife 1 hour a day because she worked as a baker. And so her work started at 2 a.m. and mine started at noon. And so by the time I got home at 9, she would have stayed up till like maybe 10. But then you're going, so she had to take a nap during the day, sleep an extra 4 hours then go to work. And that wears on a relationship especially when I'm working 6 days and if her day didn't line up. And so that's, did not expect it to get to this level. And some days I'm like, I wish it wouldn't have gotten to this level because it is all consuming in that being so lucky. And maybe, I don't know because I haven't had these other opportunities, but maybe it's like a music artist or something like that where they really blow up and it's like, yeah, you're on tour 11 months out of the year. It's like, that is not what I was ever hoping for, but you're so fortunate to have it and make that money and be able to do those things that you continue to do it. But usually you'll watch a band and they're like, and we're done for like 10 years straight. And then they're like, yeah, we do love it. We just don't love it 11 months, 10 years in a row, love it. And so there are times when I'm like, I wish it was a bit more balanced so that I could have work-life balance. But there's a lot of things we just don't have control over, whether it's governmental things or just shipping containers or employees quitting or whatever it's going to be. And it's just you instantly You go from like I was coasting for a day or two to like I got to get back on it at 20 hours a day because that's what it requires right now.
Using the band analogy, a lot of bands sort of go from nothing to all of a sudden they're in massive popularity, and they kind of struggle with that, for lack of better terms, fame and fortune and all that kind of thing. Has your journey been more of a slow, gradual rise to be able to sort of work through, or was it a bit of a spike? And then there was
definitely, yeah, I would say there's been a trajectory for sure, but there's been spikes in it because I just was blind to it. And the first one was when I was just sharing my aquariums on YouTube. Before I was like, hey, I need to go on YouTube, right? It was kind of just like, oh, I'm just sharing what I do, and I was building a fish room. And I had like 3,000 subscribers, and I wasn't even monetized. So the first time I monetized was when YouTube was sending me letters like, if you don't fill out the forms, we will keep your money. And that's when I was like, oh, I've made $3,000 in the last 14 months. I'm like, hey, I should probably do that because I don't want to lose the money, but I wasn't doing it for the money. So I kind of set that up, but then we decided we were buying a home, right? And so that, while owning the store, became all consuming, had to move a fish room. And I remember we kind of got settled, and I went to an aquatic experience, which was before Aquashellas and stuff. And I showed up purely because I was looking for vendors and things to bring into my store and build a relationship with vendors. And as I show up, all of a sudden people are walking up to like, hey, you're Aquarium Co-op on YouTube. And my mind was blown because that had never happened. And I was like, yes, I'm in Washington. It hadn't clicked in my brain at that time that people would be watching me outside of Washington, because a lot of my videos were like, here's how to set up this cancer filter that we sell in the store. Come buy it from us. I would talk to people like they were 5 minutes away and drive in and come see us. And yet people from around the world were watching. And so that was the first time where that spike. And when I was at that show, so while I took like these 8 or 9 or 10 months off or whatever it was from YouTube, the channel had actually grown to like 27,000 subscribers just from like the videos that were there. And I kind of knew, but it's like when you're not looking at the comments every day or anything, it's just kind of like, yeah, that's over there. I'm literally trying to just make sure the store stayed open. And then I had gone to the event, and that's where like, okay, that first like stardom kind of like, whoa. And then I was like, I should sell stuff to those people, because it's not that I was like, hey, I got fans, I should make money off them. They were literally like, where do you buy the thing you just showed and this or that? And I was like, well, I could sell it to you because I don't know how you're going to buy it in Virginia or New Zealand or wherever. I'm like, I'm not sure how you're going to do that. And there'd be long conversations, and so much so that like some of I was doing these double 40-gallon breeder stands that you could buy at a hardware store. People would call the physical retail store, be standing in the hardware store going, is it this model number? Is it this one? And I'm like, I kind of like, what aisle would it be on? I'm like, I really don't know. I honestly don't know. You're in a different state. I want to help you. And so then I'd make another video where I'd show like the serial numbers and that kind of stuff. And we'd still be getting calls. And so that's why we're at a point now where we don't have a phone number published, because it will literally ring off the hook. And people get angry when they're like, every time I call, it's always busy. Then we went up to several operators, still had the same problem. And it's because half the people just want to chat about fish. The other half want help with a fish room. Then there's some that actually need help with like, oh, my order online or whatever. And so, yes, I was not prepared for it. And we're at a point now where I actively go out of my way to avoid people. And it's not that I would spend all day talking to any fan. I love it. It's just when you're on the way to grandma's house for dinner and you need to stop and pick up some rolls, and it's an hour and a half because you got recognized by a fan. And when you don't, if you say, hey, I got to go to grandma's dinner, you see the comments online like, that guy was so rude, didn't make time for me. And it's like, literally had the whole family waiting on me, and I didn't want to be rude to them either. And so my wife does a lot of that heavy lifting now, the shopping, and even answering, like when we order Amazon and stuff, when packages come to the door, if I answer it 1 out of 15 times, it's, oh my God, are you Cory from Aquarium Co-op? And then they'll ask, can I get a tour of the fish room and this and that? It's like kind of in the middle of something. I'm at work and all of that. So that part of the fame is super cool, but then also disruptive. And so I try to harness that part of it into, hey, today I'm going to go do all this and be all with all the fans, and today I'm going to try to not do that part. And there's still always, like I've almost been late for planes with TSA and stuff like that because a fan will be one of the TSA officers, and you try and chat for 5, 6, 7 minutes, but you're like, actually, I gotta go. But everyone is always well-meaning. I've never really had a bad interaction or anything like that. So luckily, yes, there are crazies that send us death threats and stuff like that to the store and all that. That does exist. But outside of that, in person, haven't really had a problem.
Yeah. I never expected you would be getting death threats.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's my wife will get lots of mail in that they're worried for her safety or something like that. And what it comes down to, because I've really kind of tried to figure out like why, is when you have millions of people watching you every month, some of them are going to internalize what's going on. So if they were potentially in a bad relationship or something and they see something similar, they see that, oh, maybe Cory's doing that. I'll send them a letter to be like, hey, if you need help out of that relationship, I can help you. And they don't know that like my wife prefers not to be on camera and these things and all of that. And so it's just a perception thing. What you see online is not what goes on in real life. I try to be as transparent as I can, but there's still things that just, you just don't talk about. So, it's a little, a little weird. There's also, like love letter type stuff happens. And just if 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000 people has something mentally wrong with them. For me, that means there's, maybe a half dozen a month that are interacting with us in some way. And that's just more than we want. And because we have the retail store and everything, there's no way to hide it. They know like, well, if I sat in his parking lot long enough, he'll go to his retail store eventually. And so I don't live with the fear of anything weird happening. I just go through the day, and luckily nothing bad's happened. I'm a little superstitious, so I knock on wood, but it's been fine. So.
How do you, personally deal with that, but how do you also ensure staff safety with that sort of very low possibility, but that possibility of possibly happening? That's a lot of possibilities used.
Yeah, mostly just cameras and changing policies that we got lots of feedback from. So like the first couple we did, because we've had, and just general retail, there's risk. So even if we didn't have that, like, we've had female employees groped by people, and you have to call the police, and there's thefts, and there's drunk people, and just from being in the public, that just happens, right? And so you learn early on, like, hey, get some cameras and just try to help with that. And so we actually had the Murphy camera on the Murphy cam the whole time. We had an idea for a little while of, hey, let's turn the camera so you could see how many people are in the store, so you could be like, oh, it's not busy, I'll go in. But then we had creepers that would be like, I see you're working alone. With all the female employees. It's like, okay, can't be doing that. Forgot that there's still tons of weirdos in the world. Like, that's a wake-up call to me. And so things like, it was very controversial at the time before COVID. We stopped accepting cash. We only did credit card payment or check. And the big reason was, one, it was super slow to check out with cash. But the second one was we didn't want lots of cash in the store premises with a light staff, and so it might be one employee closing. We don't want them to get robbed. We don't want anything like that. And so we also had other rules, like not, especially after like the creeper phone calls and some of the employee getting groped and stuff. We tried not to ever close with a female closing solo, or we didn't want to send them to a bank to make a deposit. And in general, we try to avoid that. No matter who's working, we've got enough employees now where, hey, try to have multiple people close so that we don't open ourselves up to that risk. But at the beginning, where it's like just me, and then there's just the one first employee, and then maybe there's 1.5 employees, there wasn't really the budget to be like, even though we're going to be super slow, we're going to keep 2 people. We just didn't have that in the budget. And so, yeah, but there's a lot of it is you got to come to terms with there's really nothing you can do to stop crime. And I have to remind people all the time, like, what if someone steals this? Like, shouldn't we get a security system or this or that? It's like, does it stop someone smashing the window? Because it probably doesn't stop the theft. It helps us catch them. We have cameras. We have all these devices to do that anyway. But, an alarm is going to alert us, and we can drive here, and we have that. But it doesn't stop the physical theft or whatever the thing's going to go on. So you just have to manage it and realize, like, yeah, odds are low, and we'll do what we can to prevent it. And the odds are still higher that you would get into a car crash or something on the way to work than have something happen at work. And so we all live with all these things all the time. It's just whatever is prominent in your brain is what will kind of drive you crazy. So,
cool. We've had a couple of questions from the watchers, so we'll bring the first one up. Brandon has said, I know Cory has stated before he wished he'd have used a different name than Aquarium Co-Op. What is the name you'd wished you had used after all of these years?
Yeah, so I find this question to be two parts. If I had the money I had now, I would be something like bettas.com or something where you could buy the domain name for like $25,000 to $50,000 and it would just be ultra recognizable, super good for SEO and all of that. But when I started this, I obviously did not have that. So I wish I would have been something very, very easy to spell, or which, like, there's a lot of people, at least in America, that can't spell the word aquarium. And we can see the stats when they're like, trying to look us up and do these things. We can see like, wow, there's a lot of people that are having. And then, so like, there's that little part. But then the co-op part, every time, like, you just sign up for an account, let's say you're like, oh, I need to get the power turned on to a new building. And you're like, yeah, we're Aquarium Co-Op. And they're like, can you spell that? You start spelling it out. And they're like, C-O, yep, there's a dash, and then an O-P. And then you get to like, what's the email? And then it's like, oh, aquarium. And then I have to say coop. And like C-O-O-P. Like, no, you can't put a dash in there in an email. That won't work. So the name I wish I would have would be something like, just like Fish Tank Supplies, or, just something real generic. Cory's Aquarium would be fine, although no one ever spells my name correctly. They always put an E in it. So like, even that has its own. I would find some just easily spelt words that hopefully wasn't taken yet, and Fish Store Supply would be fine. It'd be great, and any of those would just be better in all the dealings we do. And the original reason why I wanted to have the co-op feel, where we buy fish from breeders and we have organic products, and we do that, not as much as we used to because the scale is not always there with that organic part, but the other aspect at the time for SEO and everything in the phone book, back when that was actually a thing, because that was a consideration of like, people still used the phone book. And it was like, well, A's are first. That's why you had like AAA barbershop and AAA, And so I was like, well, at least aquarium is towards the beginning. Fish tank is later. And so Aquarium Co-op is what we went with. And we just didn't realize that it would be mistaken for like a daycare center and all of that kind of stuff, because there's lots of co-ops where I am, and it's always for schooling and stuff like that. And so not the best marketing there, but yeah.
We've had a comment. The name makes me feel included as a customer, so I guess that gives nice big group hugs all the way around.
Yeah, I do approach it like it's a co-op. Like, how do I make the hobby better? How do I make pricing as good as I can for customers and members and all of those things? And I really try hard with that. But we're also not a legal co-op. We haven't broken the law, because the law didn't exist when we named ourselves, and they never stopped us either. But a legal co-op, I wish they would change those laws a little bit. But as long as you have 5 owners, you can call yourself a co-op. Whether you're for profit or not, doesn't really matter. Like, if Coca-Cola has 5 owners, they could be like, it's Coca-Cola Co-op, which I think kind of negates the thinking there of like, okay, well, because that's the part they want. They want it to be like, oh, it's owned by multiple people and it's supposed to have a certain kind of vibe to it. It's like, well, put some other laws in to really make that happen. And so we don't have to change our name. We've had lots of people come after us like, you can't be a co-op, you're not a legal co-op. And then it's like, yeah, look up the laws though, and we did everything legally, and we're still this, and we're not going to change it, and so we have to. The name makes us play defense. That's not fun, and any part of your business where you're playing defense is just time wasted. Of like, yeah, someone doesn't like that I said something about a fish. Now they've got an axe to grind. This is how they're going to try and win, and they'll try to win over there. It's a waste of everybody's time. We've gotten really good at just squashing it at this point, but. Yeah, it's a bummer when you're spending time defending yourself instead of trying to do a better thing. So
makes sense. Brian has asked, I managed to get 2 deliveries of stuff from Aquarium Co-op that we can't get in New Zealand before Cory had to stop international sales. there any chance of partnership shops outside of the USA or Canada?
Yeah, that is definitely, we want to. So there's at least that. We want to do this. Part of it is we're settling in Kentucky, our new, warehouse and all of that. And it seemingly is very easy. Like if you just order something out of the United States, you're like, yeah, I just had to pay a tariff and that was handled. But there is a lot of regulations when it comes to things like fertilizers and foods and electronics, and all these things each have their own, like, that's a 2-month project with this team to get certification correct to be able to get it into that country. And so what we need basically is someone in New Zealand or Australia or anywhere in the world that's like, hey, I'm willing to go on this adventure with you. They got to have a bankroll of like at least $100,000 for it to make sense to get like, hey, we need to bring a cargo container of stuff over there. We need to get it through customs. We need to do all of the proper paperwork and all of that, because there's lots of places to go. I would love to buy $1,000 worth to get started. And we go, great. Our paperwork starts at $25,000. And it's like, well, how is that? Like, well, there's all the organizations we got to make happy. And the minute we're selling there, we have to go to international tax accountants and other things that are required by law. Like in the UK, for instance, I personally have to open up bank accounts and everything to do business in the United Kingdom. And so there's just always, and so that means I'm assigning powers of attorneys to my different accountants and getting things going. It's like this real process to get going. And if someone's only going to spend $1,000, I don't want to be $25,000 into $1,000 and then they stop doing it. And you could say like, well, there'd be a bunch of partners. Yes, but it's also, how do you decide if there's 15 different countries that want to start doing it? I can't outlay 15 times like that 25 grand and then hopefully we'll make it up in the next couple years. And so the answer is yes, we fully want to get back into a lot of countries like these ones, and we're looking for the right partners. And the good news is things are happening, and I'll shout out some of the people I work with, like Fritz is now, I think, in Australia, and Extreme is in Australia. And so some of these things are being made easier. Like Extreme can tell you like, here's the hoops we had to jump through. And what people wouldn't know on the back end is like, yeah, it took 3 years to get the food into Australia. Like it wasn't an easy road. And so like with Fritz, they do a lot of chemicals. So it's like, hey, can you let us know like what it looked like to get your chemicals in? We need to do that. And for all of our chemicals. And it's not just like one piece of paper, now you can sell any chemical. It's like, okay, well, Easy Green has its own paperwork. Easy Iron, its own paperwork. The chlorinator, all of these things. And so we want to make sure that when we get it there, it doesn't do us any good to be like, you could buy our sponge filters and that's it. Like, why can't I get the other products? Well, we don't have the authority to do that. And so it is one of our initiatives to work on that more and more. And as bandwidth allows, and either finding a good partner or finding someone who wants to, we can front the money in the right market, but you still got to have trusted partners and, how to make sure they have the right customer service. And it gets layers more complex for our customer service as well. Like, hey, I bought this, I'm in this country, I'm having this problem, and our people might not be experienced with 220 power lights because we don't have that in America, right? And so there's all those things. But on the back end, you can see what we're doing. We are preparing for it. Lots of our products are USB Type-C, so that will go worldwide. We're going out of our way to prepare things for expansion throughout the countries, but it's a slow road, and honestly, most companies aren't able to do it. Yeah, the Tetras, the Marine Lands, the big megacorps of the world, but even if you just look at Tropica and Dennerley and these other like mid companies, kind of like our size, they're struggling really hard to get into the other countries and do a good job. And that's the thing, is we always want to do a good job, not just, yeah, we're there. We have to do a good job also. It means when we start selling there, I got to come over, I got to do trade shows, I got to do fan events, I got to support it. Not just, we'll take your money, but we won't give you the full experience. We got to give the whole experience. That might mean I need more people to travel to Australia with me, because if we don't manage the lines, fights break out, there's things like that. So it's a team effort to make a lot of things happen.
One more question and we'll jump back to our scheduled ones. Jamie said he's been watching you for a long time and he just has one question about your true passion Stormwind or Ogura. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it.
Ogamar.
There we go.
Definitely Horde side. Playing an Orc or Undead. I'm in Maxer, so talking about World of Warcraft. Most times I have to play Undead because for so long it got the second fear break, and I'm very player versus player oriented. Player versus the computer too easy, so playing against other players in ranked play was I'm competitive whether it's fish store versus fish store, YouTuber versus YouTuber. I thrive under healthy competition, so the best thing is like when Aqua Pros, Mike from Aqua Pros, and I were at the same level in KD Tropicals. It's fuel to make the next video and do the next thing and do the next thing. And same with online competition for selling products and everything. I love healthy competition. I kind of view it as like I'm on Team Aquarium Co-op, and I tell a lot of my people that. And we're like a sports team, and it's like if you don't have good opponents, you get bored. It's like, yeah, if you win 100-1 every game, you won't have fun. If it's a close game every time, you get the adrenaline rush. You want to get better. You want to do all that, and so we like having that. And so I'm very competitive, and when I don't have it, I tend to get bored, and I'm like, what else could I be doing? Should I be getting into reptiles? Should I be getting into saltwater? And then something will happen, like, no, I gotta beat this thing. And it's not. I want to see them succeed too. I just want, I want to be number one. I want them to be number two, basically, is in a perfect world. And I think anyone that says they wouldn't want to be the number one, it's like, I don't know if you've done enough thinking about it. We all want to see ourselves win, but you also want to see your friends win. And, I guess if there was a way to tie for first, maybe I wish for that. But honestly, I like being number one if I can be wherever I can. So,
talking about reptiles and saltwater, it would seem that you've very much become quite laser focused in your one niche. And that, from my understanding, clearly freshwater, smaller aquariums, planted aquariums with smaller fish. Was that a very conscious decision on your behalf? And how did that decision sort of come across?
Yeah, from day one, that was the plan. And so I graduated high school with marketing honors, and I took a lot of business classes just because I'm genuinely interested in business, even though I wasn't very good at it for a long time. And you could argue I'm not that great at it now. There's a lot of things I do in business, like I take no debt or anything. And Aquarium Co-op should be like 5 times bigger than it is right now, leveraging debt and assuming risk. But I don't like any of the risk part, so we grow at our own pace. But it was very conscious to focus on planted aquariums because, in my opinion, at the time, it wasn't a big thing yet. And there was plenty of aquascapers and there was things, but it hadn't hit mainstream. And I still run into it to this day where when you don't visit like a YouTuber watcher's fan's home, you just like walk into a random restaurant or a random home. There's never live plants, essentially. It's pretty much never live plants. And I thought that really changed how aquariums were kept, and it taught you so much about nature. And the part why I like small fish, and really the whole store was built on this idea, and we break it a little bit now, but every fish that we sell, I wanted to fit in a 10-gallon tank. And why that is that means the store I used to run had African cichlids, had South American cichlids, also had community fish, but half your day was spent talking about what they couldn't keep, because they would go and they'd fall in love with the convict cichlid or the jaguar or the frontosa or the flower horn or the thing, and you'd be like, well, you only have a 20-gallon aquarium, you can't keep that. So half of the conversation was no, maybe, no. And they'd be like, well, can I keep? You show them this, like, those are tiny fish. And so when we went to keep a whole store this way, you don't spend the whole time going, no. Instead, you go, yeah, that'd be fine. That's fine, too. That pretty much is fine. And so our overall ethos is, can it live with live plants? Can basically all the fish go together? And so we can tell people just the answer is yes. Those could go. Yes, you could keep those. There's a way to make that work. And that makes it way easier to train employees. I was super frustrated when I would go into pet stores and you'd be like, oh, well, the saltwater guy is not in today. Or I'm the reptile person. I'm not really the shrimp person. And so I wanted everybody to just know, like, what meds we use, how all these nanofish and live bearers and normal fish work. Everybody's a planted tank person. And at the time, and I still remember this like 7 years ago at an aquatic experience, I'd be giving talks, and I remember I was on a panel of these store owners talking to other store owners, and they were asking like, "What's the thing you've done in your fish store that has really resonated well?" And this one guy had been not in the business for like 30 years. He's like, "Well, we brought on this thing called shrimp and nanofish," and I'm thinking, 10 years ago was the time when this was new, and this was new and radical, but he owns like 11 pet stores, and that was the new thing. And so I was ahead of the time, even though there were still stores doing it before us, and now there's so many more. But I still think there's a long way to go. I still believe there are more aquariums out there without plants than with. It's just still not fully adopted, and to this day, even though our whole line is trying to make it easier, people still can struggle a lot because they go from I ride motorcycles to now I'm trying to do nature, and they don't have any green thumb, or feeding a dog versus feeding fish, very different. And so there's a lot of room to make up there. And every year though, I do think we get more and more market penetration with people keeping live plants. So yeah.
Has your approach to fish keeping changed over the years? Obviously, you would have started with just a handful of aquariums, and now you've got significantly more. Has that mindset changed? How you do fish, how you do aquariums?
I think technology helps. I think I've learned more. It gets easier to set systems up, but I have a personality that's an all or nothing thing. So like I was a hardcore gamer, and then when I got into fish, like gaming didn't exist anymore, kind of. And so one aquarium, like my first aquarium might have only lasted 6 weeks before it was like, oh, to 3 aquariums, to 20 aquariums, to it's my whole garage. That was within the first year. I remember in the first year we were taking out an extra couch that seemingly only company used so I could fit another 110-gallon aquarium in the living room. And so I've always kept a lot. And I would say the way I've changed over these, let's say, last 18 years or so is that from being able to keep every size aquarium in the amounts you want, just assume that you could be like, anything you could think of you could do, you did it, and now you have the wisdom of having done it. I find myself knowing that smaller aquariums allow me the same enjoyment with less work. So an example I can use is I've got an 800-gallon with like over 100 Congo tetras. If the Congo tetras were right there, I would get the same enjoyment, even though it's only 150 gallons, because you don't, at a certain point, you might go, 1 dog is absolutely amazing in my house. I love dogs. 2 dogs, oh, it's really good. My wife can have a dog to pet, and I could pet a dog. The 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, that's kind of only making things harder with you're not really spending more time with dogs. And I think that happens with fish a lot of like, yeah, you just have more and more aquariums, but if you're not spending more time, you're just diluting down. And so I think everyone finds their own balance, but the smaller aquariums, faster to clean for me. I keep less fish in the aquarium, and I spend less money while doing it, and it allows me to be a little more nimble. And so that's the thing I think I've learned is like bigger is not always better, even though it seemingly is always said that. I find that the right amount is the right amount. If you love cake and you get it and you go, oh, that was so good. Well, if you start eating 3 pieces of cake every night, by day 3, you're like, I'm kind of tired of cake. I would love anything besides cake, ice cream, something. And I think that happens in the hobby a lot. We go from 0 to 60 real fast, and then we got to find out, we need to back off. I am doing too much of the thing I love.
Yep. I think that's a very common thing as well. We feel with so many people we've shut a few tanks down just to condense to a optimal level for their own personal life.
Yeah, and you don't really know it till you get there. It's like, because you're eating a piece of cake, you eat 1 piece of cake, and I think everyone's experienced this some point in their life. Let's say you're at a wedding or something, you like eat a piece of cake, you're like, that was amazing. And so you get a second piece of cake, and like by halfway through, you're like, you know what, this is actually really rich. Like, this is too much. But somehow in the first piece, you were totally on board to eat a second piece. And by you get a little bit into that, you're going, what am I doing? This is insane. And that happens with every hobby in our life. And I think with aquariums, it's just a lot harder to step it back. You're like, well, I've already got all the things set up. I spent all the money. The animals are here. Like, what do I do? Just like a dog. If you get too many dogs, you feel real bad. Like, well, I'll just give this dog away. You kind of don't. You just live with it. It's like a 10-year decision. And aquariums tend to be very similar. And you feel the guilt is what holds people back is, I feel guilty giving these back to the pet store. I feel guilty doing the thing. And I would say you should feel guilty by not engaging with the thing you wanted as much as you could. And someone else could be doing that. Give it to your niece or your nephew or your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad. Let them enjoy the nature that if you've only got an hour a day and you've got 10 aquariums, you'll still spend an hour a day at 5 aquariums.
We have had another question. I've invested in making things I dislike doing easier. It's changed my whole outlook. What have you implemented in your fish room to make your job easier?
Yeah, for me, so I go through cycles of what makes it easier. So like anyone who hasn't had it would think that automatic water changes makes things easier. And it totally does. I will automatically change water, and that is very easy. The problem is when you don't manually do a water change, your hands aren't getting wet. And so what that means, you don't go, hey, that leaf's having a problem, I'll pick that. Hey, there's a little bit of algae there, I'll hit that while I'm gravel vacuuming or whatever I'm doing. And it doesn't get the finer detail attention. You don't notice, oh, there's a batch of fry back in the corner. Oh, this thing, oh, the filters sound a little different because you're just almost hands off. And so like Dean went to the same phase, went from manual water changes to fully automated to in between where he has to like manually start them. And so for me, what have I found? I found that knowing that I can basically automate everything. I can automate feeding, cleaning, dosing. I can automate the entire thing. I can automate it so much that I won't even look at my fish room. But that ends up defeating the entire purpose. And so actually what you've seen over my videos and stuff is like, why don't you use auto feeders on everything anymore? Why aren't you using auto dosers on everything anymore? And it's because if I automate absolutely everything, I don't even know what's going on in my tank. So now I feed several times a day myself. I scrape the algae myself. I will gravel vac myself, even though it's automatic water changing and I've turned the water changes down. All of these things actually keep you in tune and is the enjoyable part. Like, I think it's like keeping a garden for people. Yes, you love it when the flower blooms, but you also enjoy, playing in the dirt, moving the plant, fighting against the opposition. Like, oh, I think it's gonna be a cold snap this week. I better do something to keep my plants healthier and happier. And that's what I loved about keeping ponds outside is fighting nature. Whether it was a squirrel, a raccoon, frogs getting in, it changed it and going, I couldn't automate that. I couldn't automate making it raccoon proof or frogs got in or I've got tadpoles. And so it made me think, well, how am I going to, maybe I just make more guppies, let them eat some. That's fine. I'll feed more food. I'll do this. And I think the key takeaway for me is no matter what you're going to do in your fish room or with your tanks and your hobby, make sure that you're still spending the time. And a lot of times, I definitely started out this way. I'll have to spend less time with my aquariums if I automate all these things without realizing if you don't spend X amount of time that's enjoyable, you just pretty soon don't have a hobby anymore. It's a forgotten thing that exists. And so finding that, I find for me personally, even though I live, eat, and breathe this all day long, which when I didn't do it for work, I wanted to spend more time. But I find about 20 to 30 minutes a day is what I find enjoyable with maybe one day a week where it's like 4 to 6 hours. And so that means basically feeding all day, kind of looking at a few groups of fish, maybe moving a little bit is what I like to do every day. And then there's one day a week where it's like I want to get that project done in with my aquariums, whether it's swapping a filter, whether it's rearranging, whether it's trimming. And that could be 4 to 6 hours and listening to some podcasts or whatever I'm doing. And that has been very healthy for me with my current workload, where when I travel all the time, I can't have that. A lot of times I miss those 6-hour sessions and then it's down to maintenance and you have someone feeding your fish room and you're relying on all the automation. And I lose connection with my fish room of like, and Dean says the same thing to me. He goes, when I'm traveling and I'm speaking at the clubs, I'm doing these things, my fish stop breeding. Even though we're feeding the same thing, writing down, hey, this gets a half a cube of bloodworms is way different than, ooh, they're getting close to spawning. I'll feed them a little bit more. I'll be ready for the fry tomorrow. And so, missing a weekend every month somehow sets you back 2 or 3 months in a fish room. It's a weird thing. And maybe it's just the way we run aquariums, but that's what we find is changing things, making it easier. As long as you're not reducing the amount of time you spend actually getting your hands wet, I think is fine. If you're spending less time with your hands wet, I see detriments to my hobby when that happens for me.
At this point, what's been the most rewarding thing you have achieved with setting up Aquarium Co-Op?
The most rewarding thing, let me think. There's the problem is I feel like I haven't achieved any of the things all the way to 100%. So there's different, like I'm super proud of our membership club on kind of YouTube, because we have one of the biggest paying memberships of a kind of a fish club that's out there, and it's an amazing community. But then there's like certain products where I'm super proud of, but you know, at the time, and I still am super proud of Easy Green. At the time, chemists and everybody would literally tell me that's impossible. You cannot do that, and I had to bet money and just do what I ask. And now, though, fast forwarding, like I think next November, Easy Green will have officially been on the market for 10 years. And yeah, so time flies, right? But now you're like, everybody's got an all-in fertilizer. No big deal. Like, yeah, Cory, think it's a big deal, but at the time, I was a lunatic for saying it could even be done. And so I am super proud of that, and we've made it better over the years. And so there's things like that, you know, I lose sight of how big of a deal it was to actually pull it off after all of that time, because you're on to the next thing you're going to launch and you're going to do. But the Easy Green is still, I mean, you know, I love our sponge. I love all of our products because I work with them intimately for a very long time. So it's hard for me not to love my products. And so it's kind of a no-brainer. But the Easy Green, when you really think about, like, it didn't, and it could have existed in a parallel universe, because at the time, as a hobbyist and everything, I couldn't have known like every fertilizer in every country in development. So like you could be like, well, technically Tropica had it out. But it's like Tropica was a tiny brand back then. Maybe they had the all one, maybe they didn't. But I developed mine in isolation, and the chemists were literally can't be done. And now it's just a commonplace thing of like, of course you're kind of feeding an all-in-one fertilizer. Like that's just what is almost standard now. And so that is one of the biggest accomplishments. I mean, obviously there's the physical building of Aquarium Co-Op and getting it to where it was today. But that's not just like the Easy Green for the most part was just me back then. Now a lot of stuff is me and teams of people making stuff happen, where I might be really good at designing a product, but there's different people for logistics and product packaging. And my specialty is, how do I want something to work with 20 years of hardcore hobbyist knowledge, and then the marketing of it. Like, what is the correct way to explain what you're going to want to hear to buy the thing and to use the thing and explain it. But when it comes to graphic work and design and all of that, it's like I can tell you what I think looks good, but I can't tell you how to make it better. And it's kind of like cooking. I'm not well seasoned at cooking at all. My wife's like, what does it need? I literally have no idea. I could taste it. It's like, does it need salt? Does it need peppers? Does it need this? I have no idea. I could just know that when I taste it, it's missing something. And that's kind of how I work with graphic people, and it drives them nuts. They're like, well, what do you want to see? And I'm like, better than this? How? That if I had the artist brain, I'd be doing this. I don't have the artist brain. I can design this and make this a better product brain. I don't have that brain. I have a marketing brain. That works out really well, in the messaging and what people are going to want to hear. But in terms of what makes this look just right, I don't have it. So, yeah, super proud of a lot of things. And honestly, it's, there's always a couple moments a few times a year, and it's usually when it's late at night and I'll be walking in my warehouse or my fish store, and I basically have this like clearing of the mind, and I go, I literally own all of this. We've accomplished all this. I own it outright. There's no debt to anybody. It's like, this is insane. Like, I remember when I was just trying to set up that rack. I remember when that was an idea. And in fact, I'll grab it real quick. I have this to remind myself daily.
I hope everyone's enjoying the stream. If you haven't yet, don't forget to do that whole like thing and all the other gross YouTube stuff.
So I went through and found old pictures of the store and stuff. And so, like, this picture here this is literally shelves in my store from maybe year one of opening. You see full line of Seachem products, Seachem root tabs, tweezers, scissors, sponge filters, all different brands. You take the same picture, it's completely a wall of green of stuff that we've done and improved. And so I think back of that, it's like, it's easy to forget, because I've been walking the store and it's been Aquarium Co-Op green for a long time, that we've come a really long way. And like, here's test strips. Like, each one of these things that became our own, like, oh, that's a year of my life. Oh, that's 6 months. Oh, that was 4 years of my life there. And then I also have pictures of like talking in front of groups of people to be like, hey, these are the people that I'm actually working for. Is these, yeah, they showed up, they came to an event, they paid to be there to listen to me talk about just anything really, and they're excited to be there, and I design products for them that they will enjoy just like I will enjoy. And so I keep these just over above my aquariums to remind me of just like, yeah, all that's actually being accomplished, because it's real easy to start to see spreadsheets and numbers and things and all of that, and you got to sometimes step back and go, remember, we're designing it for that 14-year-old Cory that really wanted this thing not to suck? That's who we're doing it for. So, yeah, I go out of my way to try and remember the things we've accomplished, because every day is 5 more emails with things that have gone wrong. You don't really get emails about, hey, here's what went right.
Yeah.
So,
when it comes to your product development, is it like getting frustrated in the current product? I think I can do it better. Is it from a business point of view, I think I can produce it for cheaper and make more money? Is it a combination? How and why do you develop your own lines of things?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, it was frustrated with products, want to make them better. Then it became frustrated with products some. Usually there's always something to improve about every product, my own included. Someone, I'm sure, like, you should do this better. And then it became pricing, though, because what would happen was companies keep raising their prices, and the wholesalers raise the prices on us, and some products start becoming like, this is just not worth it. And one for me that I can call out is the Python hook. It's just a piece of plastic that hooks over a thing, and like, I remember when I first started selling it, we sold it for $12, and I was like, wow, this is an expensive piece of plastic. Now it's $25. It's a really expensive piece of plastic, but they have the patent, so no one else can make one. But it's things like that where everything, like when sponge filters start getting crazy expensive, it's like, shouldn't be that. And there's still, like, it's expensive, and there's things I don't like about it. Like, hey, you've got the bottom starting to rust out on it, and this is starting to happen. Like, I could fix those things and save myself money. Now we're at a point where I think about more than just me, because we have over 200 partner stores at this point. And so we'll get ideas from them of like, hey, this is getting really hard to get. The price is getting insane. Is Co-op going to release their own version? And we go like, well, let me look at what that. And so that'll get surfaced up by my team. And then I go, well, we got to start brainstorming. How could we actually make this product better as opposed to just doing a Me Too product? Because we have some of those. I would say like airline connectors, there's not really much you could change. I actually have a couple ideas. We're going to change them, but some of the products are so basic, there's like nothing you can really do other than like, we could change the price a little bit. We could put them in different packs. Instead of a 50 pack, it's a 10 pack or whatever. But all of those factors now go in, and it's, like with foods, we're launching our own foods. We've always wanted to. And what I see over time is prices keep going up. Quality keeps getting worse in general, just because they're trying to save money and do things, and they don't have the scale. And so the benefit of Aquarium Co-Op is we have pretty powerful marketing, because we've got a big YouTube channel and all that. And so what we can do is we basically take the people's money, and we go, we're going to go make a food, and when I launch it, people will buy it. And then we take that money and we make the next food. And so what other companies don't have, like a Cory, they can make a food, and they've been around forever, but it's nearly impossible for them to get the word out that their food is new and why is it different, and they really struggle on that part. And so we are very good at that part. And so we're fortunate that as long as I do a good job, it sells really well. Our new food is selling amazing. Our next new food will actually be out in like a week or two, which is going to be amazing. Which that was not planned. They were supposed to be like 3 months apart, but port congestion bungled all that up. And so I just, we're fortunate that we've got the support we do to make these products better. And when it comes to the foods, because we can buy in massive bulk, like our first run, like of our Magic Nano, we started with 4,000 units. That's not common. Common would be much smaller units for a company to start with. And so we placed an order for 4,000 units, and then 2 weeks later placed another order for 8,000 units because we kept doing the math. We're like, 4,000 is not going to work. And in fact, we sold over 1,500 in the first 10 days. And so knowing that a container of food to get to you takes about 3 months, if we sell 1,500 of 4,000 in 10 days, we will for sure run out. And so as our, we've got lots of fans, as you guys purchase from stores or us, we, pretty soon, maybe in a year from now, the minimum order is going to be 10,000 to get started. And sometimes you crush yourself under your own weight because to launch a new product, like, wait, how many tens of thousands of dollars is it for a food? A food should be a cheap one, but like our brine shrimp orders, they start at $75,000 now. So to get a refrigerated container from China with the quality we want to us starts at $75,000. And so that you have to plan for that. That's a huge outlay for a product that has like no margin but is good for the hobby. And so that's why we don't just why don't you just fix and launch all the things all the time? It's like, well, there's a lot of money that goes into launching this after all of the prototypes and samples. And, a batch of food in a box this big might cost you $200 through FedEx if you don't want to wait through customs and everything for 3 months. So you just go, okay, well, FedEx it, it'll be $200 or $300. Still takes a week or two to get through customs and everything with the right thing. And then like with all these foods, we still have to file permits with the FDA and all these things. So you can have we often run into that. We have the world's best product right here. And it's like, sweet, we will launch it once we can get through regulations. Oh, that's going to be another 14 months. That sucks. So yeah, some things are easy. Like there's no real regulations around a sponge filter, but you start getting into foods and electronics and chemicals and there's lots of regulations. So yeah.
I thought it was really interesting you used the Python hook as an example because I was just looking at it the other day going, they retail for close to $90 here.
It was insane.
How can I ask people to pay that much for it, let alone consciously sell it for a piece of bent plastic? So, yeah.
And that's where Aquarium Co-op hopes to come in and we go, hey, we've done a thing that's similar. Hey, we actually made it better, and I know I would make that product better. And you go, hey, you could retail it at 20. And you're going, this is a no-brainer, of course. And when there's a lack of competition is where that, in my opinion, that gouging comes. There's a certain point, like I know exactly how much it costs to make things, and it's like, someone's getting a fancy dinner night, fancy night out for dinner every time one of those sells. That's unfortunate on the back of the home hobbyist. And in my mind, I always go, can a 14-year-old hobbyist afford this? Because we shouldn't gatekeep of like, well, if you're super wealthy, you can have one. And, it is, I will say it's a product that you will use forever. It'll pretty much never break. It is super useful, but it doesn't have to be that expensive. That's the only thing is that it could be all those things and also be affordable. And everybody in the chain, the manufacturer, the wholesaler, the retailer, they all made money and got to stay open. It can happen.
Got a few questions from the floor, so we'll bring them up.
Yeah.
Ethan would like to know, did the L507 manage to make their way to the US and subsequently be bred? He has some in the UK that he brought back from a recent Peru trip.
Yeah, they, for us, didn't make it. So one of our Peru trips where we went and collected fish in the wild, found some amazing gold, metallic gold kind of plecos. They also had some green ones. And when we collected them all and got them, we flew back. They had to go through customs and all that kind of stuff still. And the problem was they got on the plane and then someone smuggled drugs onto that plane. So that plane got seized and all of our fish sat on the tarmac basically for an extra 7 days. They still shipped them and it was 90% losses. And so, the one that was, there was 1.5 that was still alive by the time it made it to us. They didn't live for more than about a week with all the meds. And Dean and I, we did our best for dang sure, but it was just too much ammonia burn and everything in the bags. And so we haven't been back specifically on that trip to recollect. I did hear that potentially Eric Bodrock got some back into the U.S. on a future shipment, but I haven't seen any for sale, so I'm not sure if he got them to breed or what his experience ended up being with them. So hopefully they'll just populate the hobby and we won't have to try and get them out of the wild again.
Very unfortunate, but I guess those things happen.
Especially when you pay all that money too. Like, that's always a bummer. But the good news is we get to crowdsource it in that, like, memberships and all that stuff, we all kind of eat the burden. And then, like with the Vienna guppies, I brought them back. I got them in the country. Yeah, it cost me like $600. But then we just sell them for like, they're $30 a pair, and everybody can get access to them. And so we commoditize the co-op part of it. It's like everybody can partake in this. It's not only people can afford. Because that's so often what happens. Like, if I paid $600, I'm going to sell them for $200 a trio, and start gatekeeping. And it's like, well, if we just sell a lot of them for cheap, we can then buy the next expensive thing and try again. And then sometimes you have it go wrong where, we basically, between Dean and I and the shipping and everything, it's like those plecos basically were $6,000-$7,000 investment that didn't pan out, with the trip and the time and all that. But we could try again, and people will love them. They should be like a $20 to $30 fish, and they'll be great. So hopefully someone gets them going.
Melissa would like to know, what is your favorite combination of fish?
Yeah, if I could only keep one aquarium, it would definitely be fancy guppies, probably mutts, as in just mixed, and cherry shrimp. I think those are just peanut butter and jelly for me. They just go hand in hand, super good. You can breed them. They're never ending. There's a kaleidoscope of color. So if I could only have one aquarium, if it's like, what are you super nerding out about right now? I can't get enough of rosy barbs. And now it's funny. I'm hearing from more and more people that like, the store can't find any because there's just so many selling because they're such good algae eaters. But I just recently put in some gold barbs to test their algae eating ability. And I'm convinced actually that most, like, let's call it 75% of all barbs are great algae eaters. We've just done a terrible job of documenting it as a hobby. And so I'm kind of making it my little pet project to self-test and get other people to self-report. And then within 5 years, everybody would just know, like, you got hair algae? Get some barbs. The only ones that so far I've tested that don't really eat algae would be like cherry barbs. But everybody else, you watch them nibble at it. Some are better than others. And rosy barbs seem to be amazing at it. But from what I can tell on forums and in videos, this isn't common knowledge. It's like, you'll see it, you'll find it like, I think they're doing this. I think that's happening. But it's not like, we know Siamese alligators do it. We know flagfish do it. We know Amano shrimp do it. Barbs are not in that category. And I feel like barbs have been around forever in the hobby. We should have been able to document this in the magazine type days.
Do you think that is part of the barb syndrome? A lot of people avoid barbs because they are, I personally believe they're kept incorrectly, too small tanks, too smaller numbers, and sort of deal with each other. And you say the word barb, and people go, I don't want to barb that, so don't even begin to experience that.
I talked about that a little bit in a live stream, 1 or 2 live streams ago, where I think, because me coming up, I read all the magazines, and every time you read about a barb, it was always, they just classified them as like semi-aggressive to aggressive, got to keep this amount. It's always like, if you keep under 13, it's going to be a problem. They can be really nippy. And as I now have started giving them a fair shake, as in I'm keeping them in my personal aquariums and I'm doing these things, I am not seeing that. But yes, they can be that behavior, but I'm not seeing that on average. I'm seeing mostly like they are no more, in my opinion, nippy than Congo tetras, diamond tetras, a lot of these other things. But they don't get that bad rap because, tetras are nice, barbs bad. And so I think we've done just a generalization. And being that we had one limited info source for a long time, being magazines and then forums, and being humans, we parrot what we hear. And maybe if we haven't experienced it, right? And so I think that just became a true statement. And I guess I'm basically doing work to undo that statement by learning and going, well, when I kept barbs in my 800 gallon, I didn't witness that. When I'm keeping it in the store, I'm not witnessing that. When I'm keeping it in these planet tanks, I'm not witnessing that. And as I'm trying more and more, I'm like, I don't know. This seems more myth than fact, but let's get a few hundred people's experiences in on this. And it's like, because sometimes that is like, I consider breeding shrimp and plecos to be very easy, but not everyone has that experience. So you got to make sure that I'm not just going, Cory just says money falls from the sky. It's like, if that's not everyone's experience, that's not actually happening. So you need a group effort to go, hey, I'm experiencing that too. And so we've got someone was playing with some black ruby barbs. They were taking picture week by week, watching them eat the algae away. And so that's all been useful. And I think the more of us that can kind of play with that and document it, the better the hobby will be. Makes me no money, anything like that. But the fact that we could control algae with some of the fish that also look amazing. Like, sorry to say it, but Siamese algae eaters don't look very cool. You know, they're just not a cool looking fish. And when you tell people, like, yeah, get some of these, it'll help you, they're like, oh, is there anything that doesn't look terrible that'll do this? And for a long time, the answer was like, not really, no. So, yeah.
Cool. Aquatic Moose has said, I have loved applying Cory's business ethos to my own business. Where does he learn and stay up on business theory? And is there any golden nuggets of business knowledge you have to share?
For the most part, I do a lot of, I hang out in business groups, like on Facebook and Slack a little bit, but honestly, they don't help, if I'm being honest. I think that's a distraction. For me, I think the best tip for my business, and whether it's fish keeping or business or whatever, usually people are listening to me because they're like, hey, whatever he's doing, I've tried some of that and it's working for me. I don't think what I do in business would work for, like, oh, you make fighter jets or you make bicycles. Like, I don't think it is. But for me, what works really well is spending time thinking, like, is this good for the customer? Are they enjoying it? When I watch the customer, do they use it the way I think? And the good news is, at least about my business, aquariums, there's a million groups, a million channels, and you can do customer research all the time and go, like, I'm always, whenever anybody posts a picture, I'm looking to see which of our products have made it, which haven't they. Oh, you still use these test strips. Oh, you're still doing that. Use that dechlorinator and this food and this thing. And I'm going, I wonder why. Is that because they're new to the hobby and they haven't run out of that yet? Is it because, like, some products, like I know a dechlorinator, for instance, whatever dechlorinator you start using and you have success with, you'll just use for the rest of your life. Unless they do something to disrupt your cycle, like the store runs out, they raise the price too much. But most of us growing up in this hobby, we have used Prime. And if you've used Prime, you're always going to use Prime, because it's not really a thing of like, ooh, this one's Prime but better. Like, they're all the same thing. It's just like, you use what you use. It's reliable. And, like, we have our own fertilizer now, or our own dechlorinator. We're not trying to convert people from Prime to it, even though you save a little money. Purely, we want to start like, oh, you're a brand new hobbyist? Use ours. And you'll just always use it. It will always work. It'll always be affordable. We can control it. And so I'm always analyzing people, whether I'm standing in a store, whether I'm standing. Sometimes I'm studying social media on a plane. I want to know. I'm looking over their shoulder, going like, what app are they using? Like, oh, is it an iPad? Is it phone? Is it this? Like, how are they actually consuming things? And going, like, I'm convinced personally that in the not too distant future, every platform will just be vertical. I thought this 5 years ago, and I thought people thought I was insane. And there still will be people in the chat that go, nope, I'm on a desktop. I like landscape. We are the minority. I don't watch video on my phone, but what I see and the metrics and the analytics, it's like the people that use a computer like we're using right now, they're down to less than 15%. And there's more people that watch YouTube on a TV than a desktop computer or a laptop anymore. Like, that's a mind-blowing stat. So that's why YouTube, when you look at it, they're really launching into, there's a whole other app called YouTube Living Room, right? Because they're like, oh, they see this shift coming. And so still the bulk, 80+%, basically, is still vertical, or let me it's not vertical. It is mobile phone. And when I study my mother-in-law, my wife, people on a train, and just people, almost always you will see them using a phone like this. You don't see someone walking through the airport like looking at their phone like this. They just don't do it. And so when you're driving, most times you're listening to a podcast. It's also kind of vertical off to the side. And a format like this is mostly audio. And so as we go more and more into that, watching those things and going, at what point do we start filming a fish room tour vertically? Knowing that that is the format that I'm watching people, because I will watch them watch my tour vertically, even though I filmed it in a horizontal format. And so just being able to work on those things. And, 3 years ago, I was too early. People hated it. Right now, they still think, "Oh, you're crazy, Cory," and then they watch it vertically anyway. And so I think in a few years we're going to see, and all the platforms are doing that. They all started with like shorts, and now they're like, well, shorts are 3 minutes. I meant 15. I mean 30. I mean 90 minutes. You can do 90 minutes vertical content now on almost every platform. And they're all seeing that, like, yeah, people just want their phones to be vertical because that is a better way to hold it. And so by studying the customer, no matter if it's an aquarium part or what it is, naturally this is more comfortable than this for long periods of time. If that is a true statement, you can also, shrink it down and work underneath, knowing that behavior kind of isn't going to change unless iPhones or someone radically changes the landscape. If we all go to folding phones or triple phone screens, that changes it. But knowing that it would take that radical shift, starting to prepare your business to do better in those formats. And it's as simple things like we made all of our photos have been 1,000 by 1,000 pixels for the last 8 years, knowing that that goes to every platform, even though you're like, but you get tanks are this shape. You get a better picture. Nope, they have to be square because they work on everything and we're future-proofing ourselves. And so from a business standpoint, if you can, whatever your sector is, if you look at what are the things that are going to future-proof you and probably not change, or you don't have control over to change, where can you embrace? And that's what we try to do, is just go, where can we embrace, whether it's a product, whether it's a way to deliver stuff, any of that kind of stuff. And a million, the race is done in inches, basically. It's 1 inch at a time. 1 inch. It's not we jump 20 feet ahead. It's like, oh, we updated the product packaging on this box. We did this thing. We changed our YouTube pinned comment. All these little steps in business get us to where we want to go very, very slowly. And that's the key, I think.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. One more question from Mike, and then we'll go back to our structured ones. What do you think about fluoride in water and how it affects the hatch rate of a baby brine shrimp?
So in my experience so far, I don't think it has any effect. So what I can say is the store has fluoride in the water. Dean has fluoride in his water. My old home had fluoride in its water. My current home is on a well and does not have fluoride in the water. I notice no difference between any of those. And that is just hatching a few different companies' brine shrimp eggs and tons of eggs daily for long periods of time. And so I would put money that a scientific study would be like, there's clearly a difference. And so I call it fish room science with almost everything I do. If I don't notice it in the fish room, it's not a thing to me. People all the time will say oh, every minute a brine shrimp has been hatched, it is losing nutrition. And I go, and never once has that made any difference with me spawning or raising fish ever. So whether I feed it 8 hours after it hatched, 2 days after it hatched, I've never once had it be the difference between anything, not bigger or smaller spawns, any of that. You can prove in a laboratory all you want, but if it doesn't make a difference in the way I'm doing anything, is there a difference? It's kind of that, if a tree falls in the woods, there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? It's kind of that for me, of if I can't see any difference at all and I'm looking for it, is there a difference there? And I would come back with no. If I am looking for it and I can't see it, probably not. Even though you're well, your fish are 0.1% less healthy than they could be. Does that matter? Probably not for me. So.
How have you seen the aquarium hobby change over the last 10, 15 years?
For me, mostly it's being that I work in it, but social media, I think 10, 15 years, and I'll preface this with, I think society overall, not just the hobby, we have become very insulated from other people. So 15 years ago, I would go to every club meeting, I would read in magazines, I would visit fish stores, and I would participate in forums, and maybe a little bit of, actually no, I didn't participate in any YouTube or Facebook group. Now, we watch hobbyists all the time that have basically never been to a store, and I mean a fish store, maybe a PetSmart or Petco, a chain store, but never been to a hobbyist store. They order everything online. They get all their information from Facebook or YouTube groups, basically. And what I see the outcome of that being is there are a lot of armchair experts that and you see it in some groups more than other, like bettas and goldfish and some of these things. But like, yes, you keep 2 betta tanks, and you give off the impression that like you're a 20-year veteran betta breeder by guiding other people when your knowledge is limited to your experience. It's not that it's untrue. I don't see people giving out untrue experience. I oftentimes in my own groups see people going, no, you have to do it this way. And it's like, no, there are a bunch of ways to do this. You have very good success doing that. And I find that when I try to pull people back into reality of like, there's not only one way to bake cookies, there's not only one recipe. And in fact, there's competitions based on who's got the best recipe and the best way to make those cookies. But in the groups, we tend to go, this is the only way to do this because that's where you found success. So if you make the best chocolate chip cookies this way, you keep telling people this is the way to do it. But my grandma makes them this way, and they're amazing also, and completely different way of doing it. They're both correct. And so I think we need to, and I saw this happening many years ago, and I try to say it as much as I can. And it's almost a meme at this point. I say in theory a lot, or here's how I do it, because as we've grown in popularity, more and more people will say like, Cory says this is the right way to do it. I need to be very clear. Just because I say I do something some way doesn't mean it's the only way or it's even the right way. There are things I do incorrectly all day long and still get good results. It doesn't mean that that is the way you should do it. I'm very clear in that here's how I do things. If you're finding success doing them the way I am, you'll probably get the same results I am. But you also get the same failures I get. And so I don't see that happening enough in social media. And I think that is one of the biggest changes of you're buying online. That's a different experience. You're getting information from different sources, where it used to be, for the most part, you got information from locals, you kind of bought local, and you could get help local. Now what we'll see happen is someone buys stuff from a bunch of different places, they put it all together, all the ingredients come together, and their cookies are crap. And then they get advice from 6 different people. You didn't let the butter come to temperature, the oven was too hot, this, cook them longer. They make all those changes, and it comes out terrible in a different way. Where if they had just learned under grandma or mom or friend, and they said, hey, this is what I do with the butter, this is what I do with the flour, this is what I do with the oven, this is what I do with the cookie sheet, they would then at the end go, and this is the cookie that came out. And if something went wrong, they instantly go, I had this happen once before. You use salted butter and you put salt in? Oh, that's why they're a little too salty. Next time, we'll use unsalted butter or we'll leave the salt out. And then that second time, you are now successful. But when you've got 15 people telling you how to cook, you're going to make all these tweaks, you'll still get the wrong thing coming out. And that's the biggest change I've seen is we don't have a clear path of buying and learning and fixing mistakes. Instead, it's all over, and it takes people much longer to get to the success part. They have to filter through like, wait, if I follow one path, I get there faster than if I take in all the advice. Because it sounds like a great idea. I'm not very good at math. I'll get 10 math tutors, but they're all teaching you different ways to do the math and different shortcuts, and you start transposing some, and you're still getting wrong answers. So it's better to learn under one tutelage or find the right teacher and go, great, I'm going to learn from them, then go, well, I'll have 10 teachers, and I'll learn 10 times faster. That's not really how stuff works.
That's something that more than one guest has said multiple times, just to basically narrow down, align yourself with 1 or 2 people, and then just work from there. With that being said about social media, do you think it's had a positive or a negative effect on the aquarium industry as a whole?
I think it's a wash. So I think, it's not even I think, the hobby is more popular than it's ever been, like just by sales and just things that industry will put out. So it is growing. I think you have to attribute some of that bare minimum to social media. But then in the ways that we've just been talking where there's been some negatives, I think that counteracts it. So I think a lot of things, it is what it is. And we don't have a magic wand to be like, social media is gone. But I do think the hobby 20 years ago was way different than it is now. You had a really tight-knit group of like Dean and I have this bond, right? And don't get me wrong, I love Dean, but there's nothing special there. And what I mean by that is the human bond of 2 people loving a subject And that used to happen all the time in clubs. You'd be like, yeah, there's the betta nerds, here's the tetra spawners, here's the Corridora people, there's the plant people, and they'd have these little cliques, and that's just how the world worked. Now, and you'll see people like, I wish I had a friend like Dean, I wish I had this, and it's like, well, you'll just never get that if you don't go to these in-person things. These people exist, and everybody's longing to share the hobby with someone in that capacity. That's what we all want. And I used to have, and I still have that, but way before we got popular, I had that. I still had Dean. I had my friends like this, and we already had that. It wasn't, and if anything, it got harder for me, but social media, it's way easier to get your aquarium fix from the comfort of your bed at night or in the morning than it is to be like, well, Saturday, I got to drive an hour and a half to get there in the rain. Then I got to do the event. I don't even really care. It's a saltwater speaker. I don't really care. But you want to hang out with your friends and you go out to eat afterwards. Like, you still have to make that effort. And I think that's missing. And so with my social media, I've made it an effort over the years. Like, we've got the local club finder on our website. We've actually expanded on the forum so that every state gets their own forum to discuss swaps and club meets. And then we've also got the international one, so you could post, like, if you have something going on, to get people back together. Like, it's great to be able to get an answer to a question this fast, but it's also great to spend 3 or 4 hours with someone and understand them as a person, to know what's the context of their advice they're giving you. Like, oh, I went and saw their fish room. Like Dean, his credibility becomes from his fish room. People see the fish. They see the knowledge. They see all that. If you could never see anything Dean's ever done, you'd question, like, has this guy even done any of this? Like, he's smart, but has he done it? But when you match up the in-person, seeing what has actually been accomplished with the knowledge, you know that, like, hey, that's a source of truth there, as opposed to just an armchair biologist, as someone said in the chat. So, yeah, I think it has changed, but not necessarily better or worse, just different.
What do you think the biggest misconception people have about aquariums is?
I was going to do like a little smart comment there. Just be like, the female betta can be kept together. But the biggest misconception, I would say, is that, in my opinion, probably the biggest misconception is that because it's on the internet, it's true. And because if you Google anything about aquariums, now there's 5,000 blogs, whether they're AI written or not, but they're basically link farms to sell stuff on Amazon and that kind of stuff that exists. And I find them all the time where I'm like, clearly this person's never actually kept this fish or used this filter or done this thing. And now there's AI that's even augmenting that even further. But we see it all the time where they'll get into our customer service and they'll finally link the thing they're reading. And it's like, this thing, no wonder you're not having success. It is 80% of the way there on everything you wanted to do. So imagine you're building a house and the resources you have would get you to 80%, like on plumbing and electricity and all of these things. And of course, now you're done and 20% of everything's not working. It's a real mess. And it's just enough accurate to feel like this is accurate and true, and unfortunately not accurate enough to actually get the result you needed. And so I think there's a lot of gaming going on in the system, and I don't enjoy it, and I'm not sure how that we're going to solve this. But that's one of the reasons why I think live streams, in my opinion, are one of the truest ways to relay information on the internet, because you can at least see I'm not real-time reading off Wikipedia and regurgitating to you. It's somehow you probably believe like this is his thoughts or his experience at least. Because even in the YouTube space, there's a lot of videos where it's like, you've made this video, you clearly have never kept this fish, because you're basically reading line by line. Like, and you'll see it in articles, and you're like, yeah, this fish pH anywhere from 6 to 8 apparently, and temperatures this wide variety, and it's like, I'm not sure you've kept this fish. Like, you could tell someone, oh, Wikipedia says guppies can be kept anywhere from 62 degrees to 80. And it's like, we all know they're going to fall apart under 70 with the current guppies you can buy on the market. That's just a thing. 50 years ago, you can keep them that low. And so I think that that is the biggest misconception, is that this website or this YouTuber that looks like they know what they're doing doesn't. It's no different than if I started making saltwater videos. I actually know a decent amount, but not nearly as much as all the saltwater channels. And that's usually I tell people, go learn from an actual expert. It's not that I couldn't make videos. I could make videos and they would get views. I don't have the expertise that, like Ryan would have at a bulk resupply. I haven't been doing it for that many years, and I don't own a company doing it. Listen to him, not me, when it comes to saltwater. Yes, I have opinions. Yes, I've done things, but I don't have the wisdom of running a saltwater store for 20 years. That is a different wisdom than I've kept this many tanks for 20 years, or I've kept saltwater for 3 years. Those are all very different opinions when it comes to things, but yet the right flashy website kind of makes them all look equal, and that's a problem we have.
Sure. How do you handle compatibility issues when dealing with customers' tanks?
Yeah, for the most part, like in our store, we don't really have that problem because everything we sell goes together, except for like goldfish. Like there's a couple things that don't necessarily go together, but honestly, I'm not sure there's that many incompatible fish outside of a certain amount of rules. Like if a fish fits in another fish's mouth, it has a plenty good chance to end up there. You avoid that, and outside of a few specific, like jewel cichlids will just beat on everything. Like they'll attack me as a human. Like there's a few of those, but I've seen almost everything done. You see people keep frontosas and angelfish together. I do lots of crazy stuff where it's like, that shouldn't be a thing. And it's like, I'm convinced that what we know works together is just what someone else has tried. So if you have a crazy idea, it's no crazier than the first people trying to keep fish to begin with. Like one of my favorite pairings that people give me a lot of crap for is I love Mabuna African cichlids with rainbow fish. They go really well for me. A nice schooling fish full of color. They break up territory issues. It's got all these benefits. And people are just like, yeah, but you can't do that. And it's like, but why not? Have you tried it? And the people that have, they're like, it actually kind of works amazing. And so you can do things like, one of my favorite setups is multi-shell dwellers at the bottom. And then you've got blue neon dwarf rainbows in the midwater. You get the color. They never want to go down. They never want to come up. They love the same water parameters. And my answer is always like, have you tried it? And why shouldn't it work? Because if you're telling me the internet says it, that's not, I don't listen to that. Like, have you tried it? Or can you give me a viable reason? Like the diets are even similar. Like what is it that wouldn't work? They come from different parts of the world. Sure. Most all community tanks are that way. And so I think once we open our minds, there's not a lot of incompatible. And even you also run into the problem of all the fish are labeled as compatible, but that I've literally had guppies beat on angelfish before. Like we've had customers have that problem where it's like this, you've got a rogue guppy, and they're like, this shouldn't be happening this way. And I go, yeah, if anything, you would expect the angelfish to be killing the guppy. And so I try to always bring it back to something people have probably experienced in their life, and that is just because you own a dog and you adopt another dog doesn't mean they're going to get along, right? It doesn't mean that they won't have a fight to the death 7 years after owning them. It doesn't mean anything. Like, these are living animals. Something could trigger them. They could get scared. Things could happen. Two dogs could love each other, and they're great for 5 years. You had a third dog, and now they're trying to breed with it. And so there's like a jealousy thing going on. Maturity can happen. One dog's getting really old, and their joints are sore, and so it doesn't like to play, and so it gets rough with the other one of like, stop trying to play with me. All of these things also happen with fish, but we boil it down to, well, of course neon tetras always get along with cardinal tetras and always get along with rummy nose tetras, but the answer is actually that's not always true. There can be you ended up with too many males, and the tank is too small, and the temperature is too high. And like one of the easiest things to fix compatibility issues, in my opinion, is to turn the temperature down. So people, when they have aggressive angels, like, don't keep them at 78, keep them at 73. They're not in breeding mode anymore. You take them out of breeding mode, they are chill. But people go, but yeah, everyone says set your tank to 78. Yeah, you can, but you're getting a result you don't want. Try something else when the result isn't what you want. And a lot of times you see people have a lot better success with their angelfish when they keep them in a different thing. The other one I run into a lot of times is like, oh, but angels are schooling fish. Like, sure. And dogs are pack animals. Keep them less than 30. You're doing the same problem as keeping one angelfish in your 30-gallon aquarium. If the animal looks happy, it is happy. If you're happy, that's the outcome you need. And if you're going to die from guilt of not keeping 30 angelfish, then don't keep angelfish. That's your decision. But compatibility for the most part, I look at it as you've got the environment wrong. If you have a classroom of kids and you've got two bullies in there, could it be that one has mental problems? Yes, it could. Most times, switching up some of the students, switching out the arrangement of the room, different way of teaching, engaging them differently, teaching them differently, one of those will change it like, oh, now it does work. And so compatibility is, do we have the ecosystem, the environment, and the way that we're going to keep fish set up correctly to the result we want? And most times the answer is no when you're running out of problem. And then we don't think about it a second time when everything's going smoothly. So outside of fish fitting in another fish's mouth and other little quirks, for the most part, fish are compatible. We just haven't put them in an environment to be that compatible in the way that we want.
Sustainability is obviously a very important topic, particularly when we're dealing with live animals. How do you approach that as a personal hobbyist within your business ethos, as well as sort of helping and educating your customer base around?
Yeah, so it cut out for a second. Did you say sustainability?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I've got some pretty strong opinions, being that I've kind of been to where some of these fish come from in the wild, and I see wholesalers and farms, and I feel like for the most part I've gotten a behind the curtain look at a lot of things. And so sustainability is one of our core principles at Aquarium Co-op, whether it's just trying to damage the environment. That's really what I boil it down to is, we need to make money. We want to do this hobby, but can we minimize the damage we would do? That's really, and different people have different terms of damage. But I think with sustainability, the easiest argument to have is wild caught fish versus bred fish. That's the easiest one to have. And there's no real right or wrong answer other than we can go with, well, here's what we currently see. If you only buy captive bred cardinal tetras, I actually have video footage of this, and we ended up taking the video down because it became way too political. But if you buy captive raised cardinal tetras and we don't buy them from the wild anymore, they burn the forest down. I've got video of it, watching it. And what happens is they grow palm oil for like an IKEA, and we lose the fish either way. So let's imagine that the industry takes out 1 million cardinal tetras a year. If we buy them and sell them as hobbyists, you can go, that's unethical, we're taking them out of the wild. If you don't buy them, those people no longer make money. They burn the forest down, and the fish, what happens, and so I think a lot of it is that people don't understand why it would affect the fish. So what happens is you get a plot of land, and it's next to a river, right? And you burn it to the ground. Why do you got to burn it to the ground? So you can plant a different crop. It's way easier to burn it than it is to chop it down. Also, the byproduct of burning the forest gives you charcoal. That's the main cooking thing. So they don't have ovens. Most don't have electricity. So you use charcoal. Like you're going to start a barbecue outside. That's how most people cook in Peru. And so by burning the forest down, you made a lot of charcoal. That has money, value, and utility. Great. That's good for them. Then you come back and you plant a crop that someone else will buy. Great, that makes money. And the problem is those palms, they don't grow as tall, they get harvested, and now the sun is beating down on the river more. It evaporates faster and the temperature is hotter, leads to fish dying. And I've done videos on this too. What people don't realize, of the 1 million cardinal tetras we harvest, basically the region floods, everything breeds, makes a ton of fish. If we don't collect any of them, the water goes back down, and 90% of those fish die because there's not enough room anymore. That's just natural cycle. So if we get in there when there's all the extra fish, we take out 1 million, and now we still die back. We actually didn't remove any of the population. We just removed ones that were already going to die. The byproduct of that is we also gave money to the people that collected them, and they didn't burn down the forest. So we actually can do it again next year. And so much so that there's organizations, Project Piaba and a couple other ones, that work with these people that are collecting to do it sustainably and try and give them good wages so that they won't do that. And there's always over farming, and that can happen. Plecos are a bad example of that one. It's a dangerous thing. They basically send free divers down, grab a pleco, and they have 2-liter bottles where they've cut open the side, and they just put it in there, and they keep doing that. And there's no reference on how many we're breeding, because those waters don't go up and down nearly as much. That's kind of a normal population that it has to keep. And but unfortunately, that's a very dangerous job that pays a lot of money, but there's a lot of drowning that goes on. And so we can help regulate that, though, of like, hey, maybe we get them some equipment. Maybe we only allow so many to be exported. Maybe we do it in these regions. Maybe we can teach them how to breed this fish by pumping water from that river into the breeding facility and then back out, and so we don't have all the danger and the other things. And so when we talk about sustainability, what I just explained there, we're getting fish out of the wild, sounds way more sustainable than the alternative of like, let's burn the forest to the ground and lose the fish forever. And then there's also things where people will bring up like the CITES and the red lists of like, hey, this fish is endangered or extinct or whatever. But unless you really are a nerd and you study that, you don't realize like no one went to look at that population since 2012. And sometimes when you go there, you'll be like, this fish is everywhere. There's millions of these things, and it's just not updated. So you can imagine what if we were to do, let's pick like corn or something that's harvested all around the world. Well, one bad weather year of like, oh, the yield was real poor, and we had a storm, and this, and we had rot, and that thing. If you wrote the CITES then, you'd be like, yep, corn is almost extinct. Literally the next year, there was 50x as much, though. And so being that there's not a lot of money to go and study fish populations, we will think things are extinct or endangered for very long periods of time when it turns out they're pretty plentiful, actually. And that's not, and I'm the first one to say, hey, let's not damage nature as much as possible. But I'm also a realist in going, if you make something, let's say you make something illegal, a black market just shows up. And that's what happens is, when we're filming in Peru and stuff, we go into people's properties and we go find these amazing fish, but we have to scrub out all the metadata from the pictures and all that so that a bad actor won't come in and they'll literally just catch everything. So they'll literally, because a bad actor goes, oh, each one of these is worth $1, I'll catch all 10,000 in this pond and they just won't exist anymore. Where if you work with them and you go, hey, how about you come and you feed these every day and you harvest 1,000 out of the 10,000 a year, and you get $10 per fish instead of $1 per fish, and that can go on for eternity. And another example of that would be, I found a really cool fish I wanted to bring back. Turned out it was a food fish. I was never allowed to bring it back, but we went back the next year because it was a very cool place to film. And unfortunately, more and more locals were using that as the laundry and bathing spot. So they were literally using laundry detergent and everything, and it had killed all the fish. There's no more fish there anymore. And it wasn't anything to do with harvesting them or anything like that. People got to live. Like, there literally is no electricity. There's no running water. It's a village in the middle of a jungle. And yes, they did get some laundry detergent because they wanted to clean their stuff. That's just normal kind of stuff that's going to happen. But had we been able to say, hey, these fish are special. Hey, they're worth something. Hey, don't use this in here. They would still be alive. And so I think kind of supporting sustainable, ethical collection of fish is actually better for the hobby. And that's why there's these movements that do exist than just only raising them artificially. I think there's room for both, and it depends on what country and depends on demand. If all of a sudden we needed 50 billion cardinals a year, nature probably doesn't support that. We need to do both. But it got to the point where we were seeing deforestation because organizations had convinced everybody that a wild-caught tetra is so bad for the environment that we actually did something worse. And so that happens all the time in lots of industries. But so sustainability, I think, is important. You only have the knowledge you have at the time, and things change tomorrow. Different rules and regulations, and a storm could come through, and things could happen. So it's always a fluid, changing conversation. But for the most part, I think I tell people, do what you think is the right thing for you. Because maybe you're 12 years old and you can only afford these non-wild-caught cardinal tetras, and you buy those, but then you buy something else that is totally sustainable, and you can only do what you're going to do as one person anyway. And so, because maybe you keep cardinal tetras that are not wild-caught today, but you end up to become a marine biologist, or you're going to be the next fish wholesale importer. You can make your impact then. And as long as you have good intentions, that's all I ask from any other human. If you go into it going, hey, I did my best, that is the best we can ask from people. You didn't try to do a bad thing. You tried to do a good thing. Even though the result was bad, your intentions were good, and that matters a lot, I think, in the world.
Right, we've got a couple of questions or two from the watchers.
Yeah.
I can't answer this because I don't know what a BioCube 16 is.
Sure.
Just bought a BioCube 16 and just put a sponge filter in it. Once I get it planted, how many pea puffers would you recommend?
Yeah, I'd probably do like 5 pea puffers. So it's 16-gallon aquarium. It's an all-in-one unit. They're usually made for saltwater, and they can be a little bit of a pain sometimes if you don't know what you're doing. Or you can have and that's if you're new, when something doesn't work right, you don't know whether it's your skill failure or like, oh, literally that pump doesn't work correctly or something. So it can be very difficult. But I like roughly 3-ish gallons per pea puffer is what I like. And it's all about skill level, because it's a store. I can keep 50 pea puffers in 20 gallons of water and it's fine. But skill level, auto water change, a staff looking after them. And then there's your aquarium and your skill level, and potentially like, oh, it's Christmas and I had to go on vacation or something. That's a different than a professional staff taking care of that. So I find the home hobbyist with a planted 16-gallon, you could probably have 5 pea puffers. There's also some male-female ratios. You can't have 5. Ideally, I want 1 or 2 males and the rest females in a perfect world. And I'd have some live snails going in there for them, and I feed some bloodworms and all of that. But it's also okay to start with 5 and go, you know what? Turns out I only wanted 3. Give a couple back to the pet store and they'll find a new home. Or you go, I got 5 and boy howdy, do I need 7? Because I spend 10 hours a day looking at them, and maybe that's true. But I think you'll find it's not so many how many. You'll probably find 1 is pretty much the same enjoyment as 5 of them are. It just becomes, I own a pea puffer tank and I manage it in this way. But I am a person that loves running ecosystems, and it's not so much about any one fish as it is the whole environment I got going. And the plants are doing a thing, and the water chains are doing a thing, and my light burned out, and my pump's doing a thing. And yes, there's pea puffers, and I'm enjoying them. But whether there's 1, 5, or 7, it's kind of all the same to me.
Cool. How do you stay motivated to keep creating content for your followers?
I don't. I'm forced to do it. And that's just me being as transparent as possible. There are times that I will wake up and I will see something amazing in my fish room, and it's the funnest day ever for me filming. And then there's the other 90% of the time where it's like, well, it's kind of just doing what it's supposed to be doing, but I need to entertain people. And so lately I just haven't been making videos I don't want to make. And so every once in a while a video won't come out during the week, but I still live stream. I enjoy being with the people. And it's really easy if someone comes to my fish room and they ask me questions, I can answer it all day long. But for me to sit here and just go, what has changed that is a meaningful video that you're passionate about doing a lot of work about? And the honest answer is you probably aren't. And anyone that's made videos, after you make a couple in your own stuff, you're like, this is a lot of work. And so traveling makes it a lot easier, but there's a lot of money and time involved in that. But for me, now my ideas are getting to be so big. I'm like, well, that's like a whole week-long shoot. I'm buying different instruments to test. I want to do this big thing about air pumps I want to do, where I've got this really advanced flow meter, and it shows how much air you're losing with a check valve. And then it does show the amount of decrease you get for every foot of tubing you're using. So I'm able to actually show, if you use 10 feet and you only needed 3 feet, you're actually losing about 15% of your air capacity by just leaving the hose to be long. You lose about 25% by using a check valve in general. And the next thing I want to do is set up a bunch of aquariums at different depths, because the back pressure there will also affect it. So now we'll be able to create kind of it's more than just a video, it starts becoming a chart and an article, but now it's something people can reference and be like, yeah, that guy was dumb enough to spend all that money and do all that work, but now we have a resource until someone else does one to do what I did. It'll be useful though. I think reference a chart, you're using up 50 or 60% of all your air capacity because you've got long tubing, you've got a check valve, and your tank's super deep. And then I also want to show different air stones because they'll have different back pressures. And but all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's gonna be a long video. That's going to be pretty thought out. And so that's the stuff I want to be doing. but it takes like a whole week of prep and lining up and going, am I missing anything? Because whenever you publish a video, for me, the thousands of people are going to watch it. That's instantly like, ooh, I should have included that. That would have been a great idea. Like when you have 1,000 minds looking at something, you see all the things you miss. When it's one thing and you go, okay, I've got 11 things I want to do. Turns out 13 were really important. I never thought of those. Dang it. And an update video takes just as much work to do it again. So, yeah, we'll have to see what ends up coming out. But those are the types of projects I'm working on long term, trying to make sure I don't miss. That was obvious. Should have done that. The latest additions were how deep is an aquarium and the air stones. Because before I just wanted to know airline tubing and check valves and pump strengths. But now I go, well, let's do the whole, like what about a sponge filter versus an air stone versus a decoration? What about, when you put a splitter in? Because like with water plumbing, every elbow you put in, it creates restriction, right? Well, what if I put a splitter? Does a splitter add any restriction to the air or doesn't it? And how much would it? So there's almost like an infinite, and somewhere you got to be like, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole that far. Instead, we'll stop here and see if people are even interested in learning all that. Because the honestly is no one wants to watch that video, but they'll all benefit from the results of knowing the data. So, yeah.
I'm aware that we're beginning to run short on time, so I've got one more question to ask, and then we'll just roll through our quick six short answer questions for you. As a prominent content creator or influencer or whatever sort of term you want to use, do you ever have moments where you're enjoying your aquarium, you think I should pick up my phone and be recording this? Or you just go, wait a minute, I'm just going to sit and enjoy this moment for what it is?
Yeah, so I've been on YouTube for over 10 years now, and before it was always this amazing grab a camera. And I now know enough to know that's no different than standing at a concert recording the whole thing, and then an hour later you can't even remember what the concert was because you were focused on, hey, someone's hand's in the way, hey, I'm following the fish, I wonder if the sound's okay. And so now more and more, I am working way more in the fish room and filming almost nothing. And I'm loving it because, that 4 to 6 hour day, what I can get done is amazing. You go into filming it and you're like, oh, I got 1/4 of the stuff done because it's like, well, set this shot up, refilm that didn't come out quite so well. And so I am mostly doing days in the fish room where I film nothing. And then I'll be like, all right, I should make a video. And I'm just showing results and I'll talk through it of like, here's how I got here. But I definitely, I was filming so much for YouTube that I lost the connection to my tanks. And so the easiest way to get that back was stop filming. And now that I can just sit there and go, oh, that thing's cool. Because when you're filming, you're instantly going, I better take care of that algae, I better buy this fish, I better do that thing. That makes the next best video. Instead, like, honestly, no one cares about this tank. What I mean by that is, like, with a 150-gallon tank as a YouTuber, I should have min-maxed what fish are going in, what's going to be the best titles and thumbnails. And I'm keeping fish, rosy barbs, no one cares. Gold barbs, no one cares. These little light plants, no one cares. I love this tank, and I love these rosy barbs so much that now people care. And so it's that weird thing of chicken the egg. Like, the fact that no one cared and I care so much, now people are starting to care, where the true YouTube game is pick things that people care about. Like, this should have been, I know I can print money and views, like make it a betta sorority, make it fancy goldfish, make it an axolotl tank, put stingrays in it, an arowana. There are things that are like, yep, you just do that thing, it will do this. But I don't do, for as much shade that gets thrown at me as I only do this for money, I basically don't do anything for just the money anymore. I basically do it, can I do this? Will I enjoy it? And will it make sure that my employees get paid on payday? Those are my priorities, not so much, will this go viral? I don't try to go viral anymore at all. There's no intentionally trying to go viral. There's no keeping any fish that I don't want to keep because I want to keep it. And ever since I made that shift, it has been a great shift for me and my hobby. And as totally went from Cory is totally burning out to I want to work on the fish room tomorrow. And that's where I'm at right now. Like, in a perfect world, I work on the fish room tomorrow, don't do anything for business, don't do anything for YouTube. And I do that a few times, and then I can't help but want to film a video and show you what I got done. Like, oh, this came together, I'm so excited. Instead of doing everything on camera, hoping this better work out because I'm going to look real stupid in about a month when this thing grows algae instead of it turning good. I can just go, hey, it totally worked, guys, and here's how I did it. And So that part has totally changed the shift. So instead of chasing the dragon, now I just kind of let it come to me is the shift that I've done.
Cool. All right, well, we like to end all of our live streams with what we call a quick score of 6. This is 6
right.
very short answer questions. They're not meant to stump you. Occasionally they do. So the first question I have, do you call heads or tails?
Heads.
Cool. Tea or a coffee drinker?
Neither. I honestly don't drink either at all.
Cool. Are we alone in the universe?
Ooh, good question. I would say no. No, we're not.
Cool.
Especially with latest testimonials of UFOs. Not that I'm into that, but it's like evidence kind of leaning towards maybe there's something.
If you could have a meal with someone alive or dead, fictional or real, from any point in time, who would that be?
Ooh, I love this question. Because that has definitely changed over the years. Who would I have a meal with right now? There's definitely like alive or dead, sentimental. My aunt who helped raise me, she is no longer alive. I would definitely love to have a meal with her again. Just because she'd be blown away that I amounted to something. Not that she didn't think I was going to, but she died when I was like 15, and so she would never got to see me as an adult. But in terms of having a meal with someone alive, like right now, it's probably another sentimental thing. Like, assuming I get superpowers here, I would have a meal with Oliver Knott, but he wouldn't have any of his medical struggles. I've been lucky enough to have some meals with him. He's a great guy, but every time I've had a meal with him, he's been having his medical struggles, and I would love to be able to have a meal and be a friend of Oliver Knott in his full strength, just because I feel like he's got the keys to the aquarium world, and he's such a getting to know that guy, even though he is such a titan in the aquascaping industry, he is a big softie that is a pure artist at heart, and that's why he did so well, because he might love aquariums more than anyone I've ever met, and that is what made him successful, is he does it for him and not other people, and that's a real weird thing to run into, because most people going, I'll get famous, I'll get money, I'll get thing. He literally just wants to make art, which is such a weird thing to see in such a pure form, and to just being around that is infectious, because it's just he thinks in a different way that no one does, and so every moment I ever get to spend with him is treasured by me.
Cool. Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Ooh, rock.
Cool. And what is your unicorn fish to either keep, see in the wild, take photos of, videos of, spawn? What is that one fish that has eluded you forever?
Anableps. It's the four-eyed live bear that's brackish water. This looks super cool. It has been on the I'm going to do that soon list for 15 years. And I have access to any point, but it's always like I don't have the time to go with it. And then now it's built up to such a unicorn that, like, if I was to fail that fish, I would be so defeated. So I really feel like I got to carve out a lot, like ensure this works so that I don't crush my own like self-ego there of like, it was supposed to be so beautiful and it was horrible.
Cool. And my last question is, where can people find you if they wanted to learn more about you or your business?
Yeah, so there's a million ways to find us, but if you really wanted to learn about Cory and my business and converse with me, I think there's two actual ways. And the first one would be you can follow me, Cory McElroy, on Facebook. And that is my own personal Facebook, and that is different than the co-op Facebook and all of that. And you'll see some of the insights into my personal life and just stuff that I think is important in the fish hobby that doesn't necessarily make sense to go on the main page. And then the thing that I would be pushing and that I really am hanging out on is our own forum. So if you go to the Aquarium Co-op website, there's a forum on there, forum.aquariumcoop.com. And that's where I spend the majority of my time, because I can actually get to know you. I can see your tanks, and we can have a thread talking back and forth for years, as opposed to online where it's like, oh, well, it kind of scrolled off the page and went into the ether. And so I'm really getting back into more old school, because I'm trying to basically cultivate what I want, and that is more long-term connections with people. And so I'm going out of my way to use formats that will help me do that, as opposed to just very short back and forth. Like, I could be in the chat here and we'll just be doing, short things to help you. But really, I want to know who you are as a fish keeper. What do you got going in life? And like, I'm really actually having a ton of fun. You've been hearing it all live stream that I have a 3D printer that my fans forced me to finally set up. It sat in the box for 2 years because I wanted to use it for business. And I'm printing something right now, my first print. I'm super excited, but it was because of the forum. Lowell made me a dedicated video and said, here's what you need to do. And so I'm following up on it. And so they're mentoring me. And that only exists in a forum for me. That I would never, I can watch videos, I can do all these things, but I would never do it. The fact that they want to see me personally be successful with it and they're willing to guide me is exactly what I needed to. Yesterday, I set it up and I did it. We're doing our first print. It's a fish-related print. Next, I'm learning the software so I can design products that I want to make prototypes of and then have made for everybody in the public. So it's a huge win for everybody involved as long as I learn the skill, and I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, I was thinking it was a train set that you just set up while we're playing with trains.
Yeah. No, that's a 3D printer doing its thing. It's apparently, to do my first print, it's 32 hours. So eagerly just watching, going, yeah, it's doing stuff. We'll see if it holds water or what it's going to do. So, yeah.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our live stream today. So thank you very much for being with us. I really appreciate it. And I hope everybody that's been with us has enjoyed this and seeing this side of you. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Hey, I've had a blast as I always do, and as I always tell everybody, you just got to ask, and you got to, so few people actually ask me to be on a show and do a thing, and admittedly, it's kind of hard to line up schedules. Like, we booked this out months ago, but I genuinely try to just make myself available as much as I can. So I'm glad you had me, and I've really had a great time, and I think these kind of things, it's a lot different. I'm smiling a lot more. I notice I'm talking faster. I'm genuinely enjoying it because someone else is you're doing all the hard work. I can see it. I know what it's like to run the interview. It's super fun and easy to be on this side of the thing, just going, he set it up so perfect. It's been a blast. I'm loving it.
Cool. Thank you very much, and thank you for those kind words. So hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you everyone for watching. So have a good one, team. Happy fish keeping, and catch you all later.